Dropping alongside patch 1.11 back in the olden days of 2015, the Women in History DLC is a free DLC for EU4, featuring female portraits for the advisors, adding a 2% chance of female advisors to appear in your court, and literally 100 new events about cool women in history that did cool stuff. Now, being a free DLC already makes this somewhat unusual. After all, free DLC as a concept is something that Paradox Interactive as a company doesn't believe in. Although they did recently shove 3 old DLCs back into the base game, so I guess they're changing, but hey look, we're barely half a minute into the video and I'm already being sidetracked. Now, getting back on track as it were, as an EU4 enjoyer from 2017, when I acquired the base game, I found the Women in History DLC already included, and that was the first time I noticed it actually, seeing, oh wow, I bought a game and it comes with DLC already included. Paradox are already out here giving you the first hit for free. But let's address the main statement, why is this a DLC? From day one, it was never monetized as it were, it didn't come as part of any pre-order bonus, they never charged anything for it or had any intention of doing so. Like, why is this just not an update to the base game? A possible reason I would think of is that you can disable the DLC, but memes aside about how the average Paradox player not only disables women in real life, but also turns off women in video games too. Has anyone ever actually disabled this DLC? No, like genuinely, disabling DLC is already a super rare thing people like me do to access generic Saxon missions for the Saxon 10% morale and 5% morale missions, instead of the DLC mission tree that only has 10% morale. But like, outside of insane modified stacking run routing, or completing previous saves on old non-DLC versions, turning off DLC is incredibly rare, but I genuinely don't think anyone has ever turned off the Women in History DLC. For lack of a better word, I don't know why this DLC is just a DLC instead of an update. I mean, if you hate a specific event caused by this DLC for some reason, or you hate a mechanic introduced, which by the way, again, this DLC doesn't introduce a new mechanic, you can just mod it out. The EU4 game files are incredibly moddable, hence things like Amber are able to exist, and if you really despise something like Siberian Frontiers, you can go into the game files yourself and change it. You don't need a computer science degree or anything to do that. A 10-minute tutorial on YouTube is already overkill, as 9 of those 10 minutes are going to be how to set up a mod file, which lets you disable and enable your changes in game. Like, if you don't care about mod loading and just want to change the game files globally, you can go into a plain.txt file and you're good. In fact, the DLC did come with an update, which among other things set the base rate of female advisors appearing to 2%. So 2% of your advisors you generate will be women. How accurate is this number? Well, finding out, you'll need a historical meta-analysis of the royal courts from America to Europe to Asia, looking at the individuals employed between the years of 1444 to 1821 and recording the gender of these employed advisors to achieve this number. We'd also need to somehow evaluate what an advisor even means in a Japanese court, to what an advisor means in an Ottoman Sultanate, to what an advisor means to a migrating Native American tribe. Once that is all done, we can do a meta-analysis to see how accurate that 2% figure actually is, which I didn't do for this video. I'm not a full-time YouTube person, I don't have the resources to do that, but if you want to help me get there, to the point where I can do history studies like that, well, you can support me by liking and subscribing as always, and if you want to pick up some cool perks and support me directly, you can do so by grabbing a channel membership down below. Anyway, that's enough self-shitting, back on track. It's a weird formatting decision for an update, like, it can't just be an update. Why is this a DLC pack? But okay, we've complained about the formatting, maybe they just decided to make it as a formatting decision and it was simpler to leave it as a DLC instead of making it a integrated update or something. It could have just been down to chance. What is the actual content of this DLC? The main highlight is the literally 100 events associated with women in history that did things that were cool, unusual, extraordinary, stuff like that. You get these events by meeting either national prerequisites or geographical ones, as well as being in the correct time for the event. So for example, to get Mary Cruz, which I think is the correct pronunciation, but she's French, so no clue about that, you need to be the country of France, and you need to be between 1600 and 1700s. If you are France and the dates match up, congrats, you're going to get the event. An example of a geographical one is Mary Sibylla Marian, which I also hope I got right, where you need to be either Frankfurt, the country, or Germany, or either own Frankfurt or Nuremberg. If you meet any of those 4 requirements, as well as having the date between 1647 and 1717, you're going to get this person. In general, these events either let you shove the person on the throne, let them advise your government, or give you a temporary buff for like 20 years. The temporary buff is actually how I learned about most of them. As for example, the German woman mentioned earlier, if you don't give her a seat in government and just kind of let her exist, you get minus 5% tech cost for 20 years. And since when routing the max amount of something you can do for a modifier stacking run, these kind of modifiers tend to come up a lot. Furthermore, as a history enjoyer, by far the women in history events and associated people with them have led to the most Wikipedia rabbit holes. But this is where the DLC really shows its age in a very awkward way. See, Paradox did want you to actually use these advisors, right? Like, if you need a 10% national tax advisor, you can't just fire advisors until the one you want spawns. So an event that gives me a specific advisor is not really valuable, considering that 99% of the time when these events do pop up, I probably don't want that advisor anyway. As such, to incentivize the little metagamers that we all are, and to pick up these female advisors and actually use them, these advisors all come with very hefty price discounts in their wages. Right. I guess now we have to address the elephant in the room. That's not a very neat bonus to give to make these individuals stand out, at least framing-wise. I mean, the messaging becomes, hire women, they're underpaid, and hence you can save money on labor costs. But this isn't what they're intending, not really. Let's be fair about this. This is a very 2024 EU4 mindset analysis of the statement. We need to remember that in 2015, when this DLC came out, as it were, and even I would say until around 2021, the game had significantly less scaling. Getting rich was insanely harder. Admin efficiency and government cap, for example, didn't exist. And there were hard-coded limits on how many states you could own. And in general, most sources of overpowered win buttons didn't exist. We had less events in the game, so less half-price traders arrive in your court. And remember, we didn't have overpowered missions because mission trees as a whole were not a thing yet. Today, in 2024, you can play a game as career and run 3 +5 advisors for 2 ducats each. But in 2015, EU4 was a very different game, meaning getting a half-price advisor meant that if you're running a +1 advisor, well, congratulations, you can probably now afford a +2 one. And if you're in a situation where not even running an advisor at all, a half-price level 1 advisor means you can actually afford them. In essence, this meant that these advisors that were showing up that were half price were just better advisors. Their half price discount meant you could afford to upgrade them to a higher level, as after all, just having higher advisors is one of the reasons you want money in the first place. Furthermore, as the game developed, discounted advisors became more and more common. Let's consider the Polish mission tree, which gives you an event to get Copernicus, a significantly discounted natural scientist. Do we now amend the previous claim that Paradox messaging is hire women and the Polish, they're both underpaid and hence you can save money on labor costs? Well, no, obviously, and you can see the issue with this kind of line of thinking. Basically, every major tag these days has half-price advisors. And given the modern environment of EU4 gigascaling and modifier stacking, you can run insane advisors even without these buffs. But they come from a place where this still wasn't the case. And indeed, Copernicus you get very early on, meaning that his discount is very meaningful still. I don't think conventionally played Poland can afford to run a +5 advisor with conventional gameplay in around the 1500s. But with Copernicus, they certainly can. What about the actual women they picked to be in the top 100 of the world for this period? Well, honestly, I have to say it's a pretty neat selection. Great distribution across the world. It's not super Europe heavy, especially if you remember that EU4 2015 had like 10 countries in America total, of which only 3 were playable. I don't mean playable in the sense that you could have an enjoyable game playing some custom content around. I mean playable in the sense that you physically were not allowed to play the other options available. From my limited understanding of history as a whole, the selection of women chosen is quite good though. In highlights impressive people throughout history that did cool stuff that was frequently overlooked. No complaints there from me. I guess the main problem is we have a very weird free DLC situation of a content pack which has unorthodox branding, providing content that is thematically very interesting but mechanically very outdated, and frankly, given the state of 2024 EU4, is disappointing at best. Not in the selection of individuals represented to be clear, but in their impact. Given the power creep of mission modifiers and just the depth of random events added, the value of a half-price advisor or even a temporary modifier like a -5% tech cost for 20 years has fallen significantly. But the contribution of these individuals to the world has not. Is this a major issue? Not really. I mean, trade winds shaped human history and are barely mentioned in the game. Siberian native councils can cast magic spells to print monarch points essentially out of thin air, and I'm pretty sure Lath from Social Streamers has been asking for Tunis missions since the Kennedy administration. These are the things in EU4 that can certainly demand a higher priority. But I'm talking about this issue now, and a very labor-intensive solution that would be very cool in my opinion would be to make the unique women in history actually provide unique advisors. Adding something like a -10% aggressive expansion advisor would be very overpowered and completely break the balance of the normal game even more. But having these advisors tied to one-off advisor events that can only be gained from these unique people would be really cool. It significantly help them stand out. Yes, it's another modifier to give out for modifier stacking, but if Paradox was worried about that, they wouldn't have made basically any part of the Persian mission tree. Would it be significantly more work to add this? Of course, no question about that. However, it would certainly make it very cool and would make these individuals from history stand out much more during gameplay, making their mark on history be significantly more noticeable. Anyway, that is all I have time for today. Thank you very much for watching, with a special thank you to my channel members, especially Ark, Solar, Solemon, W Haste, Sebastian Haller, Churndog 2.0, Nick Huss, Dark Fortuna, Big Salad, Leb Josh, Gay Fug, Volkok Norse, and Golden Arrows.